Hey, ambitious dentist, welcome to Start Your Dental Practice, the show for existing and aspiring dentists to take your dental practice to the highest possible level. I'm your host, Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV, founder of DentistMetrics.com. In every episode, we aim to demystify the how to start a dental practice problem by bringing on world-class dentists, influencers, and consultants in the dental industry to pick their brain about how to get past the barriers involved from going from no practice to being a practice owner to owning your own successful dental practice. Today's show features the founder of DentalTown. You may be familiar with Farran from episode 15 of this podcast, where you heard a clip from when I was on his show. Now, in any industry, you typically find a lot of people who are segmented off from each other, who refuse to work together and treat the world in a dog-eat-dog manner. And Howard just isn't like that. So he's got a no BS approach to the industry that makes him stand out amongst the crowd. And I think you're going to see in a second when I bring Howard in what I'm talking about. So here are a few things we're going to hear about today. You're going to hear about the sandbox effect that led to the creation of DentalTown. You're going to find out about how Howard used insanely basic market research to find the exact target market he wanted to work with in his practice. You're going to see how to get your first dental office and all the necessary equipment for $0 down. One of my favorite stories in the dental industry to date. You're also going to learn about how Howard and his team knows exactly what dentists around the world are dying to read and hear about. The lesson Sam Walton taught Howard about how to treat demographics, how to ethically charge more, the brilliant location strategy that Howard used to make veteran dentists laugh at him at first. And the favorite story I have, I said that other one was one of my most favorite. This is my favorite story in the dental industry that I've ever heard, is a story that Howard shared today about how he filled up his hygienist appointments. I think he said that he filled up 4 hygienist books of business in 2 years, and how he did that. Amazingly simple, effective, and just brilliant. I loved it. And you never hear people doing about it this way. So Howard's about to drop some very nonsensical business advice on you that you're going to be able to immediately apply regardless of what stage in your dental practice you're in. And so that you can enjoy today's talk, but still walk away with some amazing actionable nuggets, I've taken the best points from his interview and created an easy-to-reference bonus that you can save on your machine or mobile device and access anywhere along your journey of starting your dental practice. So get that by visiting startyourdentalpractice.com/bonus. That's startyourdentalpractice.com/bonus. And now let's go to my chat with Howard Farran, founder of DentalTown, and hands down one of the best leaders in the dental industry. So whenever I was starting the podcast, I thought, who are some of the best people I could get on the podcast? And literally at the top of that list was Dr. Howard himself. So Howard, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
You said the exact same thing to the last 18 guests. I'm number 19. That's all your guests.
No, but you're the real one. You're the real one. No.
I'm the real. If I'm the real one, all the others are new and improved.
Yes. Well, you have to be able to say that you've done a lot for the dental industry and creating a place where dentists can go to meet and connect and have conversations that are, real conversations about what's going on in practices today, and they can actually talk to people from all over the country, all over the world, of how other dentists solve the problems that they've had. And that communication tool is very, very important, and it's you should be commended on creating that.
Well, it was all. Did I ever tell you the story? It was purely a selfish story. I mean, it just
No.
random. Well, the hardest thing I had is, I'd leave my dental office and I'd come home, and I knew I was supposed to disengage from dentistry and engage my 4 boys, Eric, Greg, Ryan, and Zach. And I had the hardest time disengaging because sometimes something would go wrong at the dental office, and you're sitting in a sandbox trying to play with your kids, and you're thinking, God dang, what did I do during that root canal? And should I have pulled it, or should I put them on antibiotics? Or, and everybody that loved me, like if I call my dad, he'd say, well, I'll say a prayer. If I call my mom, she'll say, well, tomorrow I'll dedicate mass to your problem. And it's like, I just want to talk to another dentist. So my oldest boy's 9. He was born in 89. So in 98, he walks into my office and he says to me, can I borrow your credit card? And when your 9-year-old asks you for a credit card out of morbid curiosity, you just give it to him. And I said, yeah. And he jumps up on my desk, and we had got this AOL internet baloney crap thing for school homework. And he's doing this AOL dial up, and I'm just looking at what a stupid thing this thing is. And then he goes to a website, starts talking about skateboard wheels, and buys $100 set of skateboard wheels. And I just like blown away. I'm like, oh my God, we should be talking about root canals, not skateboard. Why is a 9-year-old talking about a skateboard when his dad wants to talk to another dentist? So the next day, I mean, that instant was DentalTown. And the next day I hired a programmer, and I did it all for selfish reasons, because my fantasy was that get the kids to bed at 8:30. And then as soon as they're at bed 8:30, I could log on, and I figure I could get maybe 25 or 50 guys at maybe a couple, maybe 2 nights a week, like maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays. We'd meet from like 8:30, 9:30 and just discuss cases. And the first month, 1,000 people signed up.
Wow.
So I had the exact same problem everybody else had, and that was just, we were lonely. I mean, and my whole motto was, with DentalTown.com, no dentist would ever have to practice solo again. And I mean, that was 98. Facebook didn't come out till 2004.
Yeah, that AOL, the day of the disc was the AOL age. Right. getting a million CDs in the mail because they really wanted you to install their software to join AOL. So that's really interesting. And how did the magazine come about?
Well, the magazine came about is I started I'll go all the way back to the beginning. So basically you kind of know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know. And what I didn't realize is that my dad had 9 Sonic drive-ins, and I was his only boy till my little brother was born when I was 17. And I always hung out with my dad and weren't running restaurants. It was just all business. It was finding locations. It was demographics. It was advertising, television, print. It was payroll and going to Carol's accounting and going over the accounting. And I just did all that, but I wanted to be a dentist like my next door neighbor, Kenny Anderson. And when I got out of dental school, I was a businessman, and I didn't even know it. I was a senior year in dental school. Everybody made fun of me because we'd be in dental school lab, like making a crown or whatever. And they just thought I was insane because I would call Kenny and I said, well, when you're, in practice, do you make your own crowns? And he goes, hell no, it's stupid. Just do it to get out of school. So I would send I said, well, who makes yours? And he'd say this lab. So I say, okay. So I sent my crown to that lab, and they made it, it was back in 2 weeks. Whereas all my classmates sat in the lab for, an entire semester, making a crown by hand. And I was sitting there in my lab, and everybody knew what I was doing. Even the teachers knew. And I had I got this 6 foot by 4 foot map of Phoenix, and I traced out the 303 Census Bureau tracts, and I had the 1970 census, 80 census, 85 mini census. Then I wrote the Department of Economic Security in DC and asked them, where the job prospects were. And they told me that between 85 and 2000, the United States would create 30 million new jobs, and half of them would be in 5 cities, Tampa, Boston, Phoenix, Orange County, Silicon Valley. And I chose Phoenix. I didn't want the mosquitoes in Florida. I didn't want the winters in Boston, and I didn't want to raise the family in California. When you grow up in Kansas, you really believe that they're all just like doing drugs and free sex in the park. And I was afraid of all people in California at that time of my life, and so I chose Phoenix. And then I had an index card. This is all before computers. I'd never seen a computer at that point in my life, so I had 303 index cards. I'm going through the mini census and calculating the 70 population, the 80s population, the 1985% change of growth, median household income. I did that for all 303 sectors. But then I mostly keyed in on the dentists per population. So I arranged all 303 cards to the most dentists or the least number of patients, like 500 to 1 in the downtown areas of like downtown. I remember 6200 South McClintock in downtown Tempe had like 380 people per dentist. And then there were these 2 on the outstretch, one far north in Scottsdale, which would be about 101st of Via Linda today, and then one far south. And it was 6,000 people per dentist, and they were building 90 homes a month. And I got rid of Scottsdale because, being from Kansas, I knew all my friends were born in a barn, including me, and I didn't have any fancy shoes or ties. And I thought Scottsdale people I wouldn't connect with, and I was so right. I'm just not like I'm just not hootie tootie high end. I could never be a Beverly Hills cosmetic dentist. I just don't have the look, the personality, and that stuff. And so I looked at this Phoenix, and it's like it was Phoenix, and it was middle class, and it was Walmart, IKEA, Southwest Airlines. It was just my type of people that I was born and raised in. And so I went to, back then it was Caldwell Banker. They were the only ones with these fancy computers. And I walked into Caldwell Banker in Kansas City and said, yeah, can you do leases in Phoenix? And they go, yeah, we're computerized. We can do anything. I said, what do you got available in 85044? And they said, well, they're building this Safeway center they got a Safeway, a Walgreens, a Pizza Hut, a Chase Bank. And yeah, they got a 2,000 square foot lease. And I said, great, I'll take it. I'll take it for a 5-year lease. And I want to get in this thing with no money down, because I didn't have any money. And they said, well, how do you get into a dental office with no money down? I said, well, here's the deal. I said, what are you going to charge for this $2,000 a month lease? And they said, well, we do 3-year leases, and it's $15 a square foot per year for the 3-year lease. And I said, okay, well, your guy built this 16-acre deal, and I'm a dental student. I don't know a thing about building. It's only a 2,000 square feet. So I went down to Patterson. They drew the prints. I got the build out, and the bid for me to do this was something like, I forgot all the numbers. This was 28 years ago, but it was something like $60,000-$70,000. And I told the guy, I said, look, you do the build out, and instead of a 3-year lease at $15 a square foot a year, I'll do $20 a square foot for 5 years. Then you do the build out. And he ran it by the tenant, and he said, yeah. And he said, yeah, because, he can't believe that someone was going to charge me all that money to do that build out. He said his crew could knock that thing out in 30 days for half the price. So then I went to Patterson, and I ordered all fancy schmancy equipment. And then they said, okay, well, I don't have a dime. I want all that equipment on a 7-year lease. And the last payment of $1 means I own all the equipment. And so I got the landlord to do the build out. By paying a higher rent, I had Patterson load up the whole damn office on a lease, and I came out there with $87,000 student loans. I graduated May 11, opened up September 11, 4 months later, and opened up and just knocked it out of the damn ballpark. So then everybody started wondering, why is this kid doing $2 million a year, and he's he doesn't how is this happening? And so the word was getting out, and then it was actually my classmates. I went back to a dental school class reunion at UMKC, and I was so excited. I was going to go back with all my friends, and we were just going to do the usual and go out and drink and eat Mexican food. And I went back there, and it was just a night of depression. I mean, they were all just getting their butt kicked, and they had associate jobs, and they were just floundering. And that's when it dawned on me that if my dad was a dairy farmer, I know everything about dairy farming through no luck of my own. And my dad was a businessman, and he was a conductor of 9 restaurants, or they could be any business. And so we just stayed up. So I was pumping him up and trying to tell him what to do. And then we just talked soberly till like 4 o'clock in the morning. And my friends kept saying, dude, you gotta write a book, or you got to do something. You got to train, you got to help other people. And I got them all fired up, and they were all excited. And so then I went back home, and I wrote a book called The Business of Dentistry. And then there was a guy who's responsible for my entire speaking career, and his name is Woody Oakes, the profitable dentist. And he had a newsletter, and he said, come on out here and talk about your business of dentistry and all that. So I went out there, and I lectured for his Destin group. Nobody knew who I was, and I was a complete unknown. And I gave a lecture, and he did this big write-up in his Profitable Dentist newsletter that went to like 10 or 20,000 dentists. And he gave it a 5-star rating. And he said, you just got to listen to this guy. And so the minute he published that, I've lectured something like 34 to 64 times a year since 1990. I mean, it was, so then I'm out there lecturing, right? So when I'm out there lecturing, I'm taking these magazines, Dental Economics, Dentistry Today, Dental Products Report, Journal, American Dental Association. I'm reading JADA, and it's always like some study of like, how many raisins they found in a rat turd, and, how much osteomyelitis. There's just all this deep science stuff, which there's a need for that, but it just didn't apply to anybody running a business. And again, this is back in 90. And then I'm reading the other journals, and it's just like the same 5 speakers over and over writing these articles. And I remember one time I sat down like 9 articles in a row, and I don't want to mention their name because I don't want to get back to Roger Levine. And I'm reading like 9 articles in a row, and it's like they're just all the same. Every month is just the same stuff. And then I'd be out there lecturing. I'd meet some guy like you. I know you're not a dentist, but some real guy in a real town like like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he's telling me this exciting thing, and I'm like, well, dude, just write it down, write it on a napkin, write it whatever. And so I was realizing, since I was lecturing once a week, and I was meeting all these people, and they were telling me these real world stories, that I was just going to collect these, and I called it the Farran Report. And I would just be a month's worth of letters and stuff that real people were sending me. There was no advertising. It was black and white. And I had 4,000 dentists giving me $10 an issue, $120 a year to send them this newsletter. So I was doing that in 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, and 98. I think 94 to 98. I think that's 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 5 years. And that was when Eric came in, my old son, Eric, and ordered skateboard wheels. So then when DentalTown, when I realized the internet, I realized, well, the Farran Report is Howard Farran talking one way to you. And I instantly saw that business model is dead, because I realized that, if you get 100 dentists in the room, everyone is a student, everyone's a lecturer. I mean, I don't care what question you have. Someone can answer the endo, the perio, the pedo, the pros. Anybody can answer. We can always, with 100 dentists, someone's got the answer, but not one dentist has all the answers about anything. And probably not 5 dentists have all the answers about anything. And so then I realized it's no longer Farran, it's DentalTown. It's just a town. I was thinking a small town, dentistry, and it's dental only, because I wanted the manufacturers in there, because if all the dentists were saying, damn, this product is great, but I hate the fact that it's red and thick, I want it blue and thin, I just knew the dental manufacturers had to be in on that conversation, because they were making all the stuff they use, just like you. I mean, if you didn't have access on DentalTown, then how would you know what your customers were facing? How would you know how to solve their problems? And dentists kept getting on there in the early days in 98, 99, 2000, saying, well, you need to kick that guy off. He's a salesman. He's trying to sell this or that. And I'm like, well, what are you, a volunteer? What do you do? Live in a mission? Pretty sure that you do a root canal with about $25 with a gutta percha and a rubber dam and some cement. I mean, God, everything that goes in a root canal couldn't cost $25, and then you charge $1,000 for it. Then this guy trying to sell you something from 3M, Ivoclar, Kerr, Ultradent, what they're evil, So I stuck to my guns, and I'm glad I did it. In fact, I think a lot of that also comes to my father, because on vacations when we were little, every vacation was the same. My dad was from Parsons, Kansas, and he wanted to go to the biggest theme park, and he liked to see stuff made. So he'd load me and my 5 sisters in the back of the station wagon, and we'd play like Monopoly from Wichita all the way to Disneyland. And we'd be in the back of the station wagon while he's barreling down the highway 70 miles an hour, with my mom up there killing a case of Old Milwaukee, throwing the bottles out the window. I mean, this is just, the seat belts were all tucked into the seats, so we didn't have to deal with that.
Pure Americana.
But he loved to see stuff made. So we would stop, and we stopped in St. Louis and watched him make Budweiser. We stopped in Detroit and watched them make the same make and model of our station wagon. I saw Coors bottles made. I mean, he loved to see plants. And so when I was had my boys and we would go to Disneyland, we would stop in and take a tour of 1-800-DENTIST. We'd stop in Denmat and Bob Ibsen and show them how they make all the toothpaste. And we stopped by ADEC in Oregon, where at one end they have pallets of like leather and beads and metals and plastics, and at the other end dental chairs are coming out. I mean, I just always loved that stuff. And I always thought that those guys were as passionate about dentistry. I mean, they all see themselves as fighting decay and trying to make you everything you need. Just like, there's, for every fireman that's putting water on the fire, I mean, someone had to make the fire truck, the ladder, the plumbing, the civil engineers bringing the fire hydrants. I mean, it's an entire huge industry. There's 2 million dentists in the world. But the whole industry's about 10 million people on planet Earth, and the Americans bill out 105 billion a year. The planet's billing out about 500 billion a year. It's about a $500 billion ecosystem with 10 million people. I mean, it's an entire civilization there's not even 10 million people in the state of Arizona. So it's a sacred sovereign profession. And that was at this point I don't even know what your question was, so I'll just shut up.
The original question was where the magazine came from, but that's a very good perspective, and it covers a lot of what we want to talk about today.
Well, I want to tell you, but the one magazine thing I didn't say about it is when I killed the Farran report, because that was one way coming at you. DentalTown magazine was also the first magazine that pretty much killed the editor. I mean, I don't think Tom Giacobbe, who's the editor of DentalTown magazine, wants to hear that. But what I mean by that is it's about data. So Jonathan goes on DentalTown and he makes a post on Monday and nobody replies, or maybe one guy. Jonathan goes on DentalTown Tuesday, makes a post, and it lights up. And everybody's talking about it, and there's debate and all that. So we went to user-generated content with what you would like, dentist metrics, dental magazine metrics, where we don't sit there and say, oh, I think this is a good article. We go back there and say, okay, well, we want a story on endo, and here's the top 20 people who post endo cases, and these 3 people are massively engaged because we got all the click data. And here's a nice guy, and he writes nice endo articles, but no one reads it, no one clicks, no one comments, no one cares. So our editorial team is completely data driven. And just because you might not like some, you might go into a restaurant and say, I can't believe I can't even believe they have that on the menu. And you're the editor of a magazine, but the sales are saying, dude, you're the only guy in town that doesn't love this dish or outfit or clothes. So I really got rid of the, when people always say, well, I got a gut feeling this is a good article. Well, guts are filled with shit. You have a fecal matter filled opinion. And I don't care what your talking monkey feelings are about this article. The bottom line is this person is hot. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's replying. And so I always see that as the hot spot. And some of these people are controversial. I mean, imagine that. Imagine not just printing puff pieces where everybody agrees. And I think that's what a lot of the nonprofits do. The nonprofits, their primary driven focus is not to offend any of their members.
Sure.
Whereas if you're a newspaper man, you want if the story don't bleed, it don't lead. I mean, I want to go with the most uncomfortable conversation we can have in dentistry. I want to go right where the debate is. I want to force you to think. And after reading it, if it makes you hate the magazine or hate me or whatever, that's your own personal issue. I mean, like surgical guides. I did this big deal on surgical guides because I had all the old guys saying, if you need a surgical guide, you still have training wheels on your bicycle. Why don't you take the damn training wheels off your bicycle, learn how to ride a bike, and nobody should need a surgical guide? Well, I mean, a lot of people they do 100% with surgical guides, and they have good reasons. But I knew that was going to make everybody pissed off on both sides of the deals, but they talked it all out. And I now think that the truth is always 50 shades of grays. And there are times where you certainly don't need a surgical guide. Maybe you don't have time to make it in the patient's right there and you want to do it there. And so anyway, so it's data driven. It's a data driven magazine. It's DentalTown, has nothing to do with me.
So you just use the most popular stories to generate what the magazine is. That's really a smart way to do it. You mentioned that you like to talk about the uncomfortable conversations that are happening in dentistry. Let's talk about one of those right now. I feel like for most private practice owners is corporate dentistry in and of itself. What do you feel like today's role and what today's impact on private practice ownership is from corporate dentistry?
Well, I think that if you take a snapshot of every 100 years back to Cleopatra, that's about 2,500 years. Then another 2,500 years back, you get to the Great Pyramids. I still think it's ironic that Cleopatra is closer born to you and me's birthday than the building of the pyramids. I mean, that's how old Egypt is. And if you look back, I mean, we just get better every century. But there's always a demon. Like when I came out of school, it was capitation. They were going to, instead of paying you a percent of the fee, they were just going to give you $20 a month and transfer all the rest to you. And then we had orthodontic centers of America that were rolling up all these orthodontists, and all the orthodontists thought they'd all be working at Walgreens, and at $1 billion cap, and it went on. So there's always a demon of the moment, but what humans don't like is like look at domestic travel. Okay, I've lectured in 50 countries. America has the worst airline service that, I mean, you have to go to a third world country to get airline service that's shitty because the pilots and the airline companies all went to the Washington, D.C. and say, we don't want any competition. So there's no foreign carriers can't do any domestic deal. They can come into a city, drop off, pick up, go back home, but they can't fly from Phoenix to LA or whatever. And we just have the shittiest service, the shittiest seats, the shittiest everything because we don't have an airline industry. We have a jobs programs for pilot, just like our education system. You know, it's plummeting every year because it's not about education. It's a jobs program for tenured government teachers. So corporate dentistry is the same thing. Do dentists want competition? Hell no. Now let's look at this dentist. 168 hours in a week. He's open 32. I mean, in Phoenix, Arizona, it's better to have a heart attack and break your leg on Sunday than to have a toothache. Because if you have a heart attack, you can call 911 and a paramedic will be there on Christmas, Easter, Hanukkah, and Sunday and take you to the hospital. And every hospital, when you walk in, there's loaded with 1,000 employees. But where are the dentists? Oh, they're all golfing. They're at the country club. They're all watching the NFL. Completely not consumer friendly. So then these 5,000 kids walk out of school, and every dental office in America is closed 4 out of every 5 hours. You paid the rent, mortgage, equipment, bill, out, computer, insurance, malpractice. The phones are ringing off the hook with people saying, help me, I got a toothache, a broken tooth. The dentist is drinking a beer, watching the NFL. He just wants the Cardinals to win. He doesn't give a shit about you or your toothache. So then corporate dentistry comes in and says, you know what, we'll be more competitive. And we'll do more group practices and we'll do more expanded hours and we'll go into demographics. I mean, Rick Workman did the Walmart deal. Walmart only started because when Sam Walton realized that Sears, Gibson's, TG&Y, and JCPenney's were not going to go into Bentonville, Arkansas. Mm-hmm. He actually went down there and talked to old man JCPenney. He went to Dallas and talked to those guys. He said, do you think you'll ever go to Bentonville? And they laughed at him. So he's like, he went back home and he thought, half the people live in the rural and these guys laugh at us. I'm going to do Walmart. He was in 32 states before he went into one of the half of Americans live in 117 big city metros. He was in 32 states where he went there. And what did Rick Workman do? Called the insurance company. He said, yeah, you sell insurance for the whole state of Illinois, all the police, the fire, the teachers, whatever. Do you ever sell it? And the people are saying, yeah, but, you know, I got your insurance, but nobody, there's no dentist around here. And they said, oh, yeah, here's our 10 worst cities. Here's where we get the 10 most complaints. So Rick says, I could open up a dental office in all 10 of those cities if you co-sign the loan. They're like, knock yourself out. We went. So he did it just like I did. Demographics. He went to the insurance company who all dentists say they're evil because the dentist wants to charge $1 million for a crown and have the insurance pay 100%. And when someone says, well, we're only going to pay 1,000 and only pay half, they're just like shocked and outraged. Like, oh my God, how could these people? I mean, they're just not right in the head. I mean, they're just not right in the head. And so Rick's getting, you know, the data from the insurance companies. And that's what every dental graduate should be doing. If you want to practice in Oklahoma, then you should call the president of Delta Dental of Oklahoma or Blue Cross and Blue Shield or Connecticut General and say, yeah, I want to go to Oklahoma. Where do you think I should never go? There's way too many dentists in supply and demand. And where do you think it'd be the best? And what do? They always point you to a town of like 3,000 with no dentists. And what does the dentist say? Well, I don't want to live out there. But he just wants to bitch about his $300,000 of student loans. And the dentists that go there, and then you go there and you're in a town of 3,000. I go up to you and Jonathan Zamir. I say, Jonathan, I want to come here, but I got $350,000 of student loans and you don't have a dentist. And I'm at the corner of First Street in Maine, and here's your bank, and here's 5 boarded up buildings. You know, can I have one of those buildings? Every single time. Oh, dude, all them buildings are 100 years old and nobody's been in any of those for 10 years. They give them a building. So now you own land and building. You're in a town with zero competition. And now you're the banker. And I said, Jonathan, I'm going to bring my bride here and have a family, and I'm going to live here for 25 years. And I need to buy about, you know, $400,000 worth of stuff. Can you give me a signature loan? What are you going to say to me?
Sure.
I mean, you're the mayor of the town. Do you want to go to your people and say, we're not going to have a dentist? You got to drive all the way to Oklahoma City to get your tooth fixed?
The mayor's going to be able to be the guy that got a dentist to come to the town. So
he's going to be a hero. And then in the big city, you know, the insurance companies, they figure out that, you know, you sell this for $1 and it costs you 80 cents. So they're going to pay you $1 and they're never going to give you a raise. And then you sign those fee schedules. So every time you do $1, you're only going to make 35 cents on average. The average overhead in dentistry in America is 64% according to the ADA. Well, in a small town, you're the only guy. You don't have to sign up for any of those things. Instead of charging $1,000 for a crown, you charge $1,200. So you only raise the price $200, but you damn near doubled your profit margin. And I can give you name after name after name of seniors in dental school who went to small towns in Iowa and Kansas and did this. And the first year did $1 million and took home $400,000 and their $350,000 student loans they got back in a year. But see, a dentist doesn't want to hear that. A dentist doesn't want to hear that. They want to hear, well, it's Rick Workman's fault at Heartland and it's Obama and the economy because like Kansas City, they got a dental school. I mean, the Kansas City Royals just won the world champion. And the most depressing thing about that is the commentator kept saying, it's been 30 years. I was in Kansas City Dental School the last time it happened, and I'm just sitting there thinking, really? 30 years? I must be old, and almost ready to die. And you graduate from the dental school. That dental school is filled with all these kids that come from small towns in Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa, and now North Dakota, South Dakota. And you're living in Kansas City, and you got the Chiefs football, the NFL, and you got the Royals baseball, and you have the Plaza, and you have old time. It's just marvelous. You got Greek food, Mexican food, you got the whole thing. And then when you say, well, but to do your business, you need to drive an hour and a half out of town. And here's this small town, 3,500. If you work Monday through Thursday, 7 to 7, do 4 12-hour days, you'll do $1 million a year. You'll make 400,000. Then Thursday night, you can crawl into your $100,000 black 2-seat convertible Porsche and drive down to the Plaza where you own a $500,000 condo. And they say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to live in the Plaza. I want to live in downtown Kansas City. I want to walk to the football game the best way. So then they go sit up in a medical dental building that's got 8 dentists in there. And the rest of their life in supply and demand, they're creating a supply of something that there's too little demand for because there's a dentist for every 500 people in those areas.
And it's all because of corporate dentistry.
And it's all because of Rick Workman, that evil son of a gun, who lives in a town of 10,000 where the tallest structure in Effingham is actually a crucifix. I kid you not.
Really?
Oh, it's this big old crucifix. And if you go down to Heartland, they're all a bunch of very Christian. I mean, they're just absorbed in Christianity. I mean, they actually think they are doing the best, nicest, sweetest thing in the world. And they got they're making jobs for all the graduates. They're very moral. I think Rick Workman is one of the nicest guys I know. I mean, he's just a good old, but again, I'm from Kansas. He's just a good old boy from a small town of Effingham. People ask me, where's Effingham? I tell them it's out in the middle of effing nowhere, so yeah, it's not corporate dentistry. And then the other thing, let's talk facts. I don't care who sets up across the street from you. I have seen zero evidence of anybody keeping their customers for life. I mean, look at the capacity. So if you get 25 new patients a month, every 33 months, that's 1,000, right? 25 times 12, 33 months, 1,000. Well, if a hygienist works 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, that's 2,000 hours a year. That means she can clean 1,000 people's teeth twice a year. Okay. Well, first of all, I've never met a hygienist that works 40 hours a week. So these are all crazy deals. So then this dentist sets up across the street via, and he puts in 4 operatories and he has a hygienist 3 days a week. And 10 years later, you come back, he still has a hygienist 3 days a week. You come back 20 years later, he still has a hygienist 3 days a week. You come back 40 years later and he's ready to retire. And there's old Bessie, the hygienist, working Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I mean, so basically, once you fill up your hygienist and whatever new patients you get a month, that's how many's coming in the front door. That's how many you're leaving. So it doesn't matter if you're corporate dentistry, if you're a woman or a man. It doesn't matter if you're Asian or Chinese or Mexican. I've seen nobody change their capacity in the 30 years that I've been a dentist. Some people are kind of slower and they open up with 2 operatories and never do get a hygienist. They're that way 40 years later. Some people are a little more aggressive. They have 3 or 4 operatories, 1 full-time hygienist, come back 20, 30, 40 years later, still the same thing. Some people are very aggressive like me, and you open up with like 3 full-time hygienists. Well, come back 10 years later, it's the same 3. So I don't see, and then play the other side. Just go walk up to random people at the store and say, hey, we're doing a survey and we're looking for people that were born in this zip code. Can you tell me, were you born in this zip code? And they say, yeah. And they say, okay, well, how old are you? And you're looking for old men. They just don't care, or an old woman. And she'll say, well, I'm 70 years old. I say, okay, in 70 years, how many dentists have you gone to in your life? they could sit there. They keep thinking of different names as long as you talk to them. Well, I used to go to this guy, then I went to that guy, then I went to this guy, then I went to that guy. Well, how many of them did you change because they died? None. Okay, so basically you've lived in the zip code for 70 years and you've changed dentist 12 times. So I don't see dentistry. Humans are too complicated. You're in pain. You don't want to max your credit card on a root canal. You're upset. You know, when my dad owned a Sonic, everybody that came to Sonic, you couldn't beat the smile off their face because they're about to get a cheeseburger and an order of onion rings and a cherry limeade. That's about as good as it gets in life, okay? What is the opposite of a Sonic drive-in? You need a root canal. I'm going to give you a shot. I'm going to max out your credit card. You're going to be sore. I'm going to put you on antibiotics and pain pills so that you're constipated and vomit and throw up. And basically, I'm going to ruin your life for a week. How does that sound, Jonathan? And then you wonder why these patients don't come back, and it's always your fault. It's never that they don't brush 2 minutes in the morning and brush 2 minutes at night. It's never that they don't floss. It doesn't matter that when you give them a floss deal and you pull it out and show it to them, they think it's a yo-yo. They've never even seen it before. You know, I mean, never mind that when they switch with Listerine, they're supposed to hold it in for 60 seconds and they spit it out in the sink in 4. It's always going to be your fault. People are extremely complex. Nobody is keeping their customers. So I don't care if corporate goes across the street from me. What do I care if it's corporate or Jonathan Incorporated? You're going to, you know, if 25 new patients walk in, Jonathan, say, hey, dude, I heard you're the greatest dentist in town. 25 are going to walk out the back door, flip you up and say, Jonathan, I ain't ever coming back here. I'm going to find me a new dentist. So until I see people putting a dam in their backyard and every 3.5 years at 25 new patients a month, they add a hygienist. So you get out of school, you have 1. Come back 10 years later, they got 3. Come back 20 years later, they got 6. Come back 40 years later, and they got a 10-person hygiene bay going with 3 associates checking the exams. Until I see that, I don't care who I'm competing against. No one can keep their customers.
It's a very, very great point. You know, as far as just competition in general, you know, business is about attracting clients, patients, customers, whatever you want to call it. And if you have somebody that opens up across the street, like you said, patients are always churning. If they stop coming to you, at some point, you got to realize, yes, you're in a business. It's a service business that you received a medical degree to be able to perform procedures to help the public with their oral health. But at some point, it's a business. And if people stop coming to you, maybe it's because you've done something in your business to, you know, maybe piss people off. There's something that you need to be doing to restructure that to where you're coming in. And that's not a corporate dentistry issue. That's your business issue. And I'll tell a lot of people that corporate dentistry coming in isn't a bad sign of things to come. To me, that's a good sign. That's meaning that they're putting a lot of money into the industry because they know it's a good business model. It works. There's enough people out there willing to pay enough money to make this whole thing churn, make it go, make it grow. And I would be more concerned if there wasn't competition, increased competition. Will there be a point in time where competition grows to a point where it's somewhat more cutthroat? Possibly, but there's the United States, like you said, is a big place. You know, the world is a big place. That there's always going to be places where when they juke, you can jive, or you can go one place or another. So, you know, I really like that the inside of, you know, the way that the patients come and go. It'd be a really interesting question to ask all those people, the 70-year-old person, to say, well, why did you leave the dentist? Was it because of the fact that, you know, you got a big bill and you didn't like it? Was the hygienist mean to you? Did the assistant, you know, wink at you when you walked out the door? What was it? All those things are very, very interesting. So kind of circling back to your startup, you said something in there, and you said, I was doing, you know, everybody was asking, why is this guy doing $2 million a year as a new guy? What was it that you were doing that was, as a new guy, that was generating this $2 million a year?
Okay, well, I would say, first of all, if I ask any dental student walking on dental school, hey, how about instead of practicing in the United States, how about you move to Tanzania or Ethiopia? No, about Somalia. How about Syria? They'd say, well, you're batshit crazy. I'm going to stay here. I say, okay, well, if you understand the difference between the United States demographics and Tanzania, then inside the United States, where are the Tanzanias and where are the Americas? And so the number one thing I did, remember, I was born in Wichita. I went to dental school in Kansas City. And people say I got lucky because I set up in this high growth area of Phoenix, Arizona. I'm pretty sure it was 1,000 miles from my birthplace by the crow flying. So I wrote first the Department of Economic Security. They told me the 5 cities that would create half the new jobs in the next 15 years. I picked one of those cities and I wrote their Department of Economic Security to see where it was in Arizona, and it was pretty much Phoenix. And I went to a place that only had one guy supplying for every 6,000 when the average dentist in America has 1,850 people. So it was demographics. Then number 2, went back in 87, everybody was going into medical dental buildings. So when you drove by, you didn't see them. They had no visibility. And I went out by Safeway, right out of storefront, right by the Chase, the Kentucky Fried Chicken, the Walgreens. And all the older dentists thought that was, they laughed at me. They said, so when you need a bypass, are you gonna go to like who's ever next to Home Depot? I mean, if you had cancer, and it's like, if you think getting your teeth cleaned is the same as the bypass, I mean, you're delusional. It's hair, nails, teeth. I mean, all the mani-pedis doing nails. What's really the difference between a rhino's nose, your nails, and your tooth? You'd have to be a histologist to figure out why. And so I went right there. So when I opened up, there was only one dentist every 6,000, but there were still already a dozen dentists in this area. And of the first 100 people that walked in, about 85% of them said, and I quote, "It's about time Ahwatukee got a dentist." And I thought, damn, there's 2 medical dental buildings across the street. There's like 3 in one and 4 in another. And then some other guys tucked around behind an elementary school. And if you drove around Ahwatukee on all the 4-lane roads, and you went up and down every 4-lane road for 10 times each, I was the only dentist in town. Then here's where I thought I did another killer thing, is I didn't have any patients. So everybody was, doing, direct mail or this or that. So I got a 6-foot by 4-foot map of just Ahwatukee. Now, Ahwatukee is Phoenix, but everybody in Ahwatukee calls it Ahwatukee. And I see that in some other big cities. When you go to a really big city, people don't say, I live in LA. They have these little neighborhoods. So everybody in this part of Phoenix, Arizona, 85044, they call it Ahwatukee or Tukey, and it's I think it's an Indian word meaning paradise, whatever. So what I did is I got a 6-foot by 4 map, and I said, okay, well, I don't have any patients, and I definitely don't have any on Saturday or Sunday. Whenever I had an opening on a Saturday or Sunday, what I would do is I would go down the street, and I had a backpack, and I had my business cards, toothbrushes, balloons, dental mirrors, gloves. And I knock on each door, and they'd answer the door, and I'd say, John, how you doing, buddy? I said, my name's Howard Farran. You know where the Safeway is on the corner of 48th and Elliott? You see that new dental office there, Today's Dental? That's me, and I'm 24 years old, and I'm gonna probably retire when I'm 74. I love dentistry. I'm gonna do it for 50 years, but I just thought I just wanted to get out and meet the neighborhood, and they when someone's running for mayor, they go door to door, and I'm running to be your dentist. And about every third person would say, well, you know what? I've been needing to get to a dentist, and you see this dude right here? And I had a flashlight, I had a dental mirror, and then they say, well, I need to come in and see you. And then in my backpack, I'd pull out my appointment book. Remember, we didn't have computers back there. We had a black little appointment book, and I opened it up. I said, well, when do you want to come in? I'm pretty much wide open from here till when I die. What works best for you? And they'd say, well, how about next Thursday at 2:00? And I would do that all day Saturday and usually half of Sunday until I had no openings the next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I mean, it was just killer. And I never did. I hear some older guys saying, oh yeah, he walked down every single street of Ahwatukee. And that is not true. I only got down about 2/3 of all the streets, and I was already on my 3rd full-time hygienist. And then I no longer had time. I was too busy on Fridays, Saturdays. I was exhausted on Sundays, but I got down 2/3 of the street, and here it is, 28 years later, and I still once a week, some old man will say, God dang, Howard, I remember 30 years ago, you knocked on my damn door. You still had hair back then. And I thought, what the hell's this dentist doing knocking on my door? But you just seem so nice, and you seem so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I thought I'd come in and give you a try. And you said you could fix that tooth, and you fixed it up good. I mean, it was just so So then people say I get lucky. I got lucky because I found Ahwatukee 1,000 miles away and signed a lease without ever being in this city before. I had never been to the state of Arizona and signed a 5-year lease. Then they say I got lucky. I got all 100 new patients a month when I'm out there getting lucky, going door to door. And I wouldn't start till about 8 or 8:30 because it pissed people off when you woke them up, you know. And I did that basically, you know, until my feet hurt. And, you know, so just get out there and run for mayor. And I want to make 3 points about what you just said that I wrote down. Customer service is always innovated in the rural areas, like your Walmarts. When you're in a town of LA, you could piss off 100 new patients a month for 40 years and not even make a dent in the population. But you notice Walmart was founded in Bentonville. Heartland was invented in Effingham. And when you're in a small town, and Walmart innovate all these things because his wife will go to church and they'd walk up to Mrs. Walton and they'd say, yeah, I bought a pair of shoes from your husband. The heel fell off in 3 days. I went to take them back and there's no refund. And Helen would come home and chew out Sam. And Sam said, well, that's how Sears, Gibson's, and TG&Y does it. And they go, well, yeah, well, that's how people in Dallas are. But this is Bentonville, Arkansas. And then so Sam uses Walmart brain. So the next time Jonathan came and said, hey, Howard, here's 10 new shoes I'm going to sell you because you sold her last pair. I'm going to say, yeah, I'll buy your 10 shoes, Jonathan, but you're taking this pair back. He started shoving back the rejects. Say, Jonathan, you sold me this shit. I sold it to Helen. The heel fell off in 3 days. She's pissed off. She told my wife at church she ain't ever coming back. So all these customer services, and that's what I tell dental students, look in the mirror. If you're a really good guy and you're, you know, a good guy, you can go to a rural and crush it. But if you're an asshole, you need to go to a big city. It's the same thing I can't believe with politicians. Why don't people tell politicians, well, you know, you're cheating on your wife, you have a hooker on the side, maybe politics isn't a good idea because, you know, they're probably going to take a picture of you someday. I mean, why would you go into politics if you can't keep your pants on? You know, they're going to find out. If you can't keep your pants on, you need to go into a very big city and lay low. You don't, and so I tell the people, if you are an asshole and you go to a town of 5,000, they're all going to know it in about 6 minutes. And there's a lot of dentists that I've consulted with over 30 years, and they tell me a couple of things that have happened in their town of 5,000. I'm from Kansas. And I say, dude, you can't repair that on Facebook and Twitter and a direct mail piece. You need to cut your losses and leave. And after meeting you for an hour, I think you should go to like New York City or LA or Boston or Phoenix where there's millions of people and so when I look at these innovative practices, the people most likely to do all the positive customer service things, they're always in the 19,022 towns where half of America lives. And they're seldom in the 117 major metros where the other half lives. And customer, and then the other thing about corporate dentistry. You know, when I was little, you know, people would make observations that there were differences in economic purchasing power, spending, or traits between, say, races like Irish versus American Indian or Hispanic. But now you really have to understand that it's not race; it's the way people think. And baby boomers think very differently than Generation Xers and millennials. And I think what people are missing out on corporate America is what you see in the 20 richest countries. And that is in Japan, the birth rate's only 0.9 because you grew up and they watch their dad work 12-hour days, 7 days a week at Toyota until he turned 60 and dropped dead of a heart attack. And all the little kids are looking at it and say, I wasn't born for Toyota. I'm not going to work like that. And I don't want to bring a kid into the world that has to do that. And these millennials, like my 4 boys, they look at me. I mean, I've worked 12 hours a day probably since I was 10. I mean, I'll probably answer 300 emails on Christmas, Easter, and Hanukkah. I mean, all I do is work, and all 4 of my boys are like, dude, you need to slow down. Well, the millennials are not going to work like their parents. And it's not just going to be the United States. It's going to be Canada, Australia, Japan, Germany, Scandinavia. And the millennials are far more likely to look at corporate America and say, oh my God, that'd be nice. I just want to work like 3 days a week. And then I don't want to do all the business stuff. And I want to have a kid or 2. And I want to have a hobby. And I want to do whatever the normal people do. And the millennials are not going to have the same amount of babies as the baby boomers. I mean, my mom had 7 kids. I had 4. So far, I got 4 boys. 1 has had 1. Japan's birth rate is below 9. If you take the United States and all of Europe and back out immigration, every one of those countries gets smaller each year. The only reason any of those countries have an increase in population is from immigration. And you come to Phoenix, Arizona, if it wasn't for 10 million Latinos that have come into this country, you wouldn't even have labor. Who would be building your houses? The reason Japan has the most automation in the world isn't because they love robots. It's because they don't have any babies and no one wants to migrate to Japan. The number one economic problem with Japan is nobody wants to move to Japan. And about 50,000 college graduates a year in Japan say, I don't even want to live in Japan. And they come to America. So the crop, they're not having babies there. The personal debt per person is United States of America. You think our debt is suffocating. We're at 100% of GDP. They're at 200% of GDP. So the point I'm trying to make is this. You're a 50-year-old doctor. And you sit there and your office is closed 80% of the week. And here's a millennial who doesn't even want to, who looks at your lifestyle and says, dude, I don't even want to be you. When I grow up, I do not want to be you. Why don't you just give me a job 2 days a week or 3 days a week? And I'll do this and that and that. And they're not business owners. And then the dentist tells me, here's the other sick thing. They say, well, I want to sell my practice. Why would you sell your practice and convert your practice to cash? Well, where are you going to put your cash? What looks better to you than owning a dental office? You don't have to do the dentistry. Rick Workman owns 1,500 offices. He hasn't touched a tooth in 20 years. Steve Thorne of Pacific Dental Service didn't even go to dental school. He's not even a dentist. He owns 500 offices. Why would you sell your dental office, then pay corporate tax on it, pay all the tax, and then what are you going to put it in? The stock market, which you have no idea. Ask everybody who put all their money in Enron. They were the 7th largest company in the world, a futures company, all based on energy, and it disappeared overnight. Same people who invested in Orthodontic Centers of America. I would rather just own a restaurant, but instead of having a restaurant in every corner, I own a dental office. And there's not a dental office in every corner because you can't open up a dental office unless you go through 8 years of school, and that's a protective moat. That's the economic barrier to entry, a dental license. So you don't have any competition. The average idiot makes $150,000 a year at it. And you can have 2 millennials in there, one doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 7 to 6, another doing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 7 to 6, rotate their week. So after every second shift, you get a whole week off. And that thing would probably be bringing in, $2 million a year, and you'd be putting $300,000 in your pocket. But, oh no, you want to sell your practice to AFCO.
And you do it for about 2 years of what your net would be. And after taxes take out all that, you're going to get about a year's worth of income out of it.
Yeah. And they think it's a good idea. And they think everything's a good idea because every time they have a good idea in dentistry, it's because someone's selling them something and they trust them. And everybody's saying, do this, do that, do that. They're all trying to sell you something. You can't practice without a CAD cam and a CBCT and a $75,000. Everybody's your friend because they want you to sell your practice because they want the commission. And I'm like, a businessman is a conductor. A conductor has his back to all the audience. A conductor doesn't go to school to learn how to play the violin. You just hire someone that plays the violin. I'm not going to learn how to play a flute or a cello or any of these instruments I can't even name. I'm not going to buy a piano and take piano lessons. It's a lot easier just to hire a pianist. And you could be a conductor and you live in your town and you own your dental office and it's open 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. You don't do dentistry. You have 2 millennials who don't even want to own it, don't even want to do that. They're moderate lives. And you could own that thing for 20 years. So
real quick, we're running out to the end of the hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. There are a few questions I want to ask you. We were talking about controversial items before, and kind of in line with the selling of your practice. There's some controversy over what's better to do. Is it better to buy a practice, or is it better to start your own practice? And I tell a lot of people, I believe that the starting your own practice in a high growth area can long term be a lot bigger boom for the new dentist than buying an existing practice. Yes, an existing practice, they have lower failure rates, and it's because of the fact there's already cash flow there. But a lot of the times, the people that aren't failing are those average idiots that make $150,000 a year that you were talking about. So what do you feel like is the better path buying a practice or starting your own?
Well, I think that's an extremely excellent, perfect question. I think that, what I did personally was I looked at national demographics, then state demographics, and I moved 1,000 miles to find a 6,000 demanding for me, one supplier. So I did that. I didn't buy a practice because they were all in medical dental buildings back in 87. And I knew that if you couldn't see it from a car windshield, you didn't exist, and you'd have to compensate for that with massive marketing and advertising. Remember, every store in a mall, when you say, God, that's high-end rent. Yeah, it's rent, but they don't have to pay any marketing because they got 100,000 people walking around this place every weekend. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So for me, it was the demographics. I had to start my own because there was nothing visible from the car. I did all that stuff. But take away, and yeah, everybody I know that walks out of dental school and does 1 million to 1.4 million their first year and brings $400,000 home personal, all went to a town of under 5,000 with no dentists. Kansas and Iowa are reporting 11% of their towns have no dentists in there. And everybody wants to go to San Diego because, dude, that's where the Chargers are. I want to go to where the San Diego Chargers are.
Beach, seafood, surfing.
and that's where millionaires vacation. That's not where they live and work. But back and answer your question, but let's say about buying a practice. Here's the number one mental error buying practice. Everybody knows that if you went out to buy a house, you could buy 100,000 square foot home, $100,000 home, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage. You could buy a $300,000 home, and it'd be a 3-bedroom and 3-car garage and 3-bath. And you could buy a $650,000 home, 5-bedroom, 4-bath. And remember, I told you earlier that in my 30 years existence, I've seen no change in capacity. The people who start out with no hygienist never do get one. The one with one still has one 30 years later. You're buying a cash flow. So you should look, when you buy that practice, if you sit there and say, well, I want to make $100,000 a year, then you can buy this little cash flow. If you say, you know what, I got an expensive spouse and I'm not going to have 1.9 children. I'm Catholic or Mormon or Hispanic, and I'm going to have at least 5, and I want 250,000, then you buy a big practice. And if you sit there and say, dude, I want to own a Porsche, then you buy $1 million practice. And then when you're done with the cash flows and you go to sell it, the thing. Nobody changes their capacity. So what they do is they try to save money by buying a very small house that's 2-bedroom and 2-car garage and doesn't have enough money to pay their student loans and their family. It's like, well, why did you buy that house? If you had 5 kids, why did you buy a 2-bedroom house? Most people with 5 kids buy a 5-bedroom house, but they'll have 5 kids at home. They'll have student loan debt, and then they'll buy the small practices. They think they're saving money. You're buying a cash flow, and it's neither created or destroyed. And 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later, your capacity is not going to change because every time you get a new patient, someone else is not going to like you because humans are batshit crazy. They're extremely complex. They're ran by all kinds of hormones, chemicals, viruses, imperfect DNA. I mean, we're all talking monkeys. So no set of talking monkeys has been able to keep a bunch of patients happy in the field of dentistry because it's a miserable event when you have a toothache and need a root canal and get your credit card maxed and it's your personal body. And it's a hell of a lot easier to have customers for life when you're in Disneyland or Disney World or Ruth Chris Steakhouse or something that everybody wants to go to. I don't know anybody who wants to have their gallbladder removed. I'm now that I turned 50, I had to have a colonoscopy to let some man go where no man's ever gone before. This isn't something that you look forward to. This isn't something they do on cruise ships. You don't go on a cruise and say, oh yeah, and on day 3, we're going to give you 3 colonoscopies. And then on Thursday, we're going to root canal all your molars. These are horrible events. So if you want to make a bunch of money, just buy a big practice that has a lot of cash flow. And the only downside risk is if that guy was doing a lot of money because he was doing a lot of molar endo and you can't, or he was placing implants and you can't, you got where you really make the money is when you buy a big practice that's doing like $1 million a year, doc's taking home 300, and it's all restorative dentistry. It's all fillings and crowns. And you can add to that something he wasn't doing. Maybe he was referring out all of his endo. Maybe he was referring out all of his wisdom teeth or extractions, whatever. But everybody who says, Howard, I hear you, but I'm honest. I don't want to live in upstate, small town. I want to go in LA. So you know what I did? I was in LA. I found me a 70-year-old dentist. He's doing $1 million a year. He was netting 350. He wanted 750 for his practice. Guy has never done a root canal or pulled a tooth. I love molar endo. I love extractions. In fact, I'm learning how to place implants. Now that practice is for free because he bought $1 million practice and he's still making the income and he's making the payment practice just from his molar endo and extractions that wasn't done before. And I can give you another 100 names of people who did stuff like that.
Great point. Great point. So if you were doing it again today, real quick, would you start a practice or would you buy a practice like that?
If I had to do it today, remember I'm 53, I would go first where I want to live. And if I wanted to live there, because I'm kind of torn, I'm from Kansas. So two of my boys like that town of 5,000 stuff. So I got two boys looking at Sholo and Seligman, Arizona. So if I went in the rural area, I'd start my own. But let's say one of them wanted to move to downtown San Francisco. Completely no need for a dentist in a state with 6 dental schools in downtown San Francisco. And say one of them went downtown San Francisco, I would go buy a practice that I wanted the income and the hours. And if I found a practice that was like 3 days a week and said it netted 350, I'd look at the dentist and I'd say, okay, can I do what he was doing? And if I can do all the dentistry you were doing, and I could add one thing that you weren't doing, I'd buy.
Very good insight. So I appreciate your time today for coming on and talking to everybody. What is a good way for people to be able to connect with you if they want to be able to continue the conversation? Is it best just to go on DentalTown and engage with you?
Same place I was turned on to you, buddy, DentalTown. And I want to thank you. By the way, you should call this the pink shirts interview. We're both wearing pink today. That means we're very secure in our sexuality.
Absolutely.
Let's call it the pink shirt. But hey, I want to thank you. I'm a big fan of your posts. You've posted several hundred times. It's an honor to be the 18th guest of your podcast. I actually discovered you on the DentalTown app. Has a podcast, and I think it's crazy when dentists they'll upload a podcast on iTunes and not on for free, but not on DentalTown with 205,000 dentists. And I have had so many people tell me that they love your podcast. And one thing about the podcast I just want to say is a lot of people have asked me that, why do you let other people put their podcasts on DentalTown? It's like, dude, I mean, that's just crazy. That's fear and scarcity. Same thing with dental magazines. I mean, I've never met a dentist that read one dental magazine. I've never met a dentist that listens to one podcast. And it's the same thing. And just my last takeaway point to you dentists out there, when you go to that small town, and let's say there's 3 dentists in there. When I go to a small town and there's 4 dentists, and at least one night a week, they all go eat at the bowling alley and have chili and a couple beers and all that. Those are the 4 happiest, healthiest dentists, because they realize they're in competition against cars, boats, trips, and they work together. And I've seen, you know how many endodontists I know of where they'll be in a small town and the one guy says, I wish all I could do is molar endo. And the other 3 dentists say, oh my God, we hate molar endo, but I don't want to send you my molar endo because then you'll do the crown and all that. And dentists say, I'll tell you what, gentleman's agreement, I'll only do the endo. So he's not an endodontist, but he says practice limited to endo. Now he has the other 3 guys in town sending him all the molar root canals. He sees 8 people a day, does 8 molars a day, hog heaven. And then some woman will move into town and she'll say, well, you know what? I didn't want to go to pediatric dental school, but I love kids. And these 4 older guys that are in their 50s like, oh my God, you like children? What the hell's wrong with you? And then they just sit there and say, okay, you practice limited pediatric dentist. So she's a pediatric dentist and never did a residency. And all the old men are giving her all the kids. And then she just, as a Jones agreement, she kicks them all out when they're 18. I mean, so don't think in fear and scarcity. And I'm the biggest fan of your podcast. In fact, I told Ryan before we got on this deal, send me a picture or something. I want to post it on because not just DentalTown, but I have a thread on DentalTown about my podcast. I want to send me a picture of your podcast. I'm going to push that on DentalTown, Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus, LinkedIn, and say, check out your show. Because I really appreciate what you're doing for dentistry. And I think in hope, growth, and abundancy, not in fear and scarcity. And I just think you're a really great guy.
Thank you so much. Very, very appreciated. And we'll definitely do that. So thanks so much for your time again today. And I hope that you had a good time.
I did have a good time. And like that pink shirt.
Thank you. So a special thanks to Howard for coming on the show today. He's absolutely full of great business and dental wisdom that I wish everyone was exposed to. And so in today's bonus, you'll be able to remember the highlights of this podcast interview and start implementing that immediately. So to get today's dental practice bonus with Dr. Farran, simply text practice to 33444. That's practice to 33444, or visit startyourdentalpractice.com/bonus if you're outside of the US. So that's it for today's episode, but that doesn't mean that the learning and implementation have to stop there. I've created a free report called The 15 Numbers That Will Make or Break Your Dental Practice. This report has been downloaded over 1,000 times by dental professionals. So if you want your free copy of this report that's going to outline what the most important numbers are in any dental practice, and it also includes how to look at your numbers, how to set goals, has a whole slew of really important information that is the culmination of all of my experience as a dental CPA, then just go to startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. That is startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. And so that's it for today, Ambitious Dentist. Again, I'm Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV. I'll see you next week with another world-class practice owner or consultant that will help you start your very own dental practice. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Start Your Dental Practice community. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor and go to startyourdentalpractice.com/iTunes to leave your honest feedback and review on iTunes. It's going to help me create a better experience, a better show, a better podcast for you, the ambitious dentist. Your feedback really does help, regardless if you like the show today or not. If you didn't like the show, let me know, because it's going to help me create a better show and podcast for you. Lastly, if you know of anybody that would benefit from today's episode and today's content, today's guest, please feel free to share with them on social media or through email.